Hi, my name is Brian McCullough, and I'm here today. And the reason I'm doing this, I'm starting this first podcast. It says, Don't Shoot the Messenger Club. Why am I doing this? Well, that's a good question. Why? The reason I'm doing this is I want people like yourself to be informed of what's really going on, not what they project and want you to believe. Just so you know, in the United States, until recently, 10, 15 years ago, there used to be 300 media companies. Now there's basically 6. So let's give you an example where we talk about they're controlling everything you're hearing. The only freedom of speech left is your podcasts. Or basically the local newspapers, they can't exist anymore. They can't even afford to have people, journalists on staff. Our local newspaper here doesn't even have a journalist anymore. Does our local county have one? No. I live in a county called Marin County. And unfortunately, we just got news that excuse me. Sorry, everybody out there, because what happens is I get nervous every time I say his name because something always does not go well when he does anything. And his name is Gavin Newsom. And now he's moving back to Marin County. Now, people say, well, what's bad about that? Well, we'll get into that later. But let us focus on, so you have an understanding of who I am. I'm in the 4th quarter of my life. So my doing this podcast, I have nothing to really gain by doing this, but I have empathy for others. So I want them to have a real understanding of what's going on. I recently spoke to one of my doctors, and that's what happens when you're in the 4th quarter. You go to doctors a lot. My doctor never heard of the petrodollar. He also basically not only did not know what the petrodollar was, he didn't know what the BRIC system is. Now, how many people are you watching right now that doesn't know that? Well, you will know. And here's what we'll give you a little heads up on too. One of the things you'll see all the time now, you'll see Powell, who's the head of the Federal Reserve. Well, I want you to have a real grasp and understanding that the Federal Reserve is not part of the United States. The Federal Reserve now is owned by the banks. So J.P. Morgan and all the big banks, they own the Federal Reserve. It has nothing to do with the government. If you're looking to get a job in the future and you want to get a job and you want to make big money, there's certain ways you can do that. One is you get into banking, because you do banking, which we'll talk about. Hold on one second. That's the wife calling. And you know what? I'm going to have to tell her I'm going to have to call her back, because she's probably really excited to see this podcast too. Anyway, getting back to it, the banks own the Federal Reserve. They like to use the word federal because it makes it sound like it's part of government. Now, Powell, who runs the Federal Reserve, was appointed by Donald Trump. And what he did is he brought rates down to basically zero. And, again, what did that do? Well, it made easy borrowing for the wealthy. But Powell talked about his toolbox too. And he always talks about tools and tools in his toolbox. I don't think Powell has ever had a tool in his hand, because he's one of those, he's an educator. And what was he? He's a lawyer. Oh, that's what we need, more lawyers running things. But he talks about tools and how he has tools in his toolbox to fix the system. The only tool he has in the toolbox that he knows is a screwdriver, because he's going to screw all of you. He's already doing it. And that's now he contributed to the $35 trillion deficit. So the United States takes in $3.5 trillion a year. $1 trillion now goes approximately interest on, just remember, interest on the debt. Now, we're going to have a lot of stories. We're going to tell you over the time it was really happening and how this debt is really going to impact us. So if we have $35 trillion in debt, then they have $7.6 trillion on their Fed balance sheet. And you're going, well, how does that happen? That's what I'd be asking. Well, how does that happen? Do they get to cherry pick what they're going to put in their holdings? How come as Americans we have what's called the Senate Banking Committee? We have 8 members. I think they're all clueless. Why isn't anybody in politics talking about our deficit? Let's see what they have on their balance sheet. I got a question for you, too. Why does the Federal Reserve have 300 economists that work there? That's a great question, too. Because I knew this really wise man one time. He was my father. He told me the only thing an economist can agree on is they can't agree with each other. So if you have 300 of them, well, how do you know which one's right? Oh, right, that's right. You want to keep your job. You agree with whoever's running it. Yeah, when the Federal Reserve, too. So let's look at the Federal Reserve and what they do. We'll be going over that. And basically, the beginning of the year, or at the end of last year, in November and December, the market had this really huge run. And what was that based on? Oh, the rate cuts. There's going to be 4 to 6 rate cuts this year. Well, how many we have? Interesting. We have none so far. What is this? This is the media. The media controls everything you hear. And here it is again. See, this is what happens when you're popular. You got everyone calling you. Okay, we had to take a couple, because this is so raw, we're getting phone calls. Again, if you called me yesterday, I might have had 2 calls. Today, I'm really popular. I've had 3 already. Anyway, getting back to it, what happened is the media, as I said, there's only like 6 major media companies, and we're going to get into details about that. And what happens, it's going to be really important to really grasp the media, how powerful the media is and what's taking up space in people's brain. Too bad we can't put and expand people's brains to really start looking at things more objectively. I've talked to my buddy here, Dominic, and Dominic is one from the younger generation, and he has a lot of questions of what's happening too, and he's learned a lot, and he's open-minded, and people need to be open-minded to listen to this show. I'm not here to start hatred. I'm not a politician. So I'm not looking, that's what they do best, is they use it as a diversion. They want each other's side to hate each other. This show is going to be basically based on 3 things. One, it's going to be based on corruption starts at home. We have a special guest today from the town of Tiburon I'm in, and this is what we call, how do we say it? And again, I'm non-binary on politics. So what does that mean? I think both sides are horrible. So I'm here because I speak to so many people too, and they're telling me how they can't believe what's going on in America today. And maybe people should start listening to what others are saying. So anyway, first, as I said, it's going to be, as we say, corruption starts at home. We have a special guest here in Tiburon, California. This is where the limousine liberals live. And again, it's non-binary. It's just the truth. This is very more of a Democratic town. If you come into our town, you're going to see that we had the gay flag flying, which, again, I'm not anti-gay. I have a lot of friends of mine, are like, they're gay. So it doesn't bother me, but we have the American flag, and the police department has the gay flag out for, again, they get a whole month for, hold on, what is it? What do they call that? What do they call that, Dominic? Gay pride for a whole month. I mean, I'm Irish. I'm Irish American. Now we're getting off cue again, but I'm Irish American. What does that mean? We get one day, St. Patrick's Day. And what do we get representing us? As some little leprechaun, No, I'm just kidding you. I couldn't care less, I do like St. Patty's Day. No one can ask me the next day, what happened the previous day. And just, when you're Irish, people come up to you and they say, you know what an Irish funeral is? One less drunk, And I go, yeah, it makes sense. Anyway, going back to it, then item number 2 is the American Titanic. That's what this second segment is going to be called every day. It's going to be called the American Titanic. We sink, why we party. And the correlation between what's happening today in the American Titanic versus the Titanic that sunk in April of 1912. And it was the correlation is just absolutely amazing because J.P. Morgan owned the Titanic. Oh, what's the largest bank today in the world? Oh, that's right, J.P. Morgan. Wait, who started the Federal Reserve? Oh, J.P. Morgan. Isn't it amazing? The barons, they called them the robber barons in the 1920s. Today, we don't call these people that are worth multi-billions. We don't call them, I don't know what we call them. What I can tell you is their wealth has been all created by the central banks and the banking system of America. So what it is that J.P. Morgan was supposed to be on the Titanic too. Isn't it amazing? And I have some article and evidence. And again, everybody calls it a conspiracy. What does a conspiracy mean? There's more than one involved. But there was 3 people, they say, on the Titanic that was against the Federal Reserve. And who started the Federal Reserve? Who was behind it? J.P. Morgan. So we'll be talking more about that. You might find it interesting. And again, why did J.P. Morgan set up the Federal Reserve? Well, he used to support the bank's collapses and the banking industry, and the stock market crashed in 1912. And you got to give the Federal Reserve great credit, because people don't learn about finance or taught anything anymore. But you got to give them credit. They basically, who else can we give credit to that started the Depression with highly leveraged situations? You could buy your stocks on 90% credit in those days. Wow. They did a great job, didn't they? Oh, who made a fortune in that? The Kennedys did. They were shorting the markets. And who started the SEC? Oh, that's right. The Kennedys did. The Kennedy. And he basically started in 1933. And that's when they started the Glass-Steagall Act. And we'll go in more detail. And that was for merchant banks and investment banks not to merge. So that's why then you had Morgan Stanley. Wow, these people, they always figure a way to get around everything. Anyway, you got to give them credit. We'll be going over that. But today, our special guest, he's going to be focusing on corruption starts at home. Because every time you step up from your city to county to California governorship, and boy, do we have a lot in store for you, which we think about. See, there it is. I can't even say his name, because every time my life's changed by everything he does, and just once I want to see for better. But Newsom, he now is come back to Marin County too, where I am, and wow, he's going to go live in Daddy's mansion. Oh, wait, not his daddy, her Daddy's mansion in Ross. So when I grew up in Ross, California, is right by us, and I grew up in a place called Greenbrae. Now, girls from Ross never dated guys from Greenbrae. Matter of fact, Gavin Newsom's wife went to a private school at $60,000, and that's where his kids are going to go. Wow. I wonder why they're not going to go to a public school, you know? So anyway, we can talk about that. I grew up in Greenbrae, and when I grew up, our claim to fame was we were close to San Quentin. You know, and some of the guys I grew up ended up there, so it was an easy commute. But we also had a family named the Gowleys, and a friend of mine, Jim, and his sister. First of all, his sister was going to bed and she was closing her drapes. And what did she say when she was closing her drape? An escaped convict. Wow. But we were warned in those days, they had huge horns would go off. So in those days, people would have guns, and then her father came running in because he knew there was an escaped convict. So what's changed today? Well, it's changed a lot. Even on the street where I grew up on La Paz, we had a person up the street, and the FBI wouldn't let us through one night because they basically had a whorehouse gambling casino there. Then the other side of the street I grew up, there was never a dull moment, especially when I lived there. We had a woman hit her husband in the head with a hatchet, and then the 2 daughters came up and visited us and came and stayed with us. That was a traumatic sight, seeing the blood all over them. And anyway, you know, people would complain and think it was me about, you know, people putting barrel bombs and M80s in their mailbox, you know, and I'd get accused of it. Can you believe that? An innocent person like me who had ADHD plus dyslexic, in those days, you were really the bad kid on the block. Anyway, to make a long story short, I'll confess now, it was me. But you can't get M80s anymore, cherry bombs. Matter of fact, You can't even find a diving board anywhere. Oh, as by the way, I'm surprised I survived. We'll get into that more later. So that's what our second is going to be. Is I'm going to give you a great understanding about what the Federal Reserve is and how the Titanic and everything's connected. Everybody thought the Titanic was unsinkable. You know, people don't understand the Lithuania was owned by J.P. Morgan. It was severely damaged, and he didn't have insurance on it. Did you know that? Wow. But guess what? He had $120 million insured on the Titanic. Isn't that amazing? And he canceled the day of the voyage. That was pretty good. It was unsinkable, too. That's what everybody thought. It was unsinkable. Wow, look at that in the Federal Reserve today. Everybody thinks America's not sinkable, too. And what's happening in America? Wow, we're sinking. We're partying. But no one seems to want to do anything about it. And that's what I'm talking here today about, is that we have to, if we don't do something, we're going to be like the Titanic. Everybody thought it was compartments, that they locked the compartments, the boat would never sink and this and that. And I hate to tell you, like everyone knows, it's sunk. So what's my point? My point is we're all partying today. Everything's great. But how are we going to exist with this debt? Are we going to go to a digital currency? Then they're going to know everything you do. So anyway, I got this too right here, and I'm going to give it to Dominic, and he show you for as I told you earlier, that if you want to make money and wealth, and you want to do it and make a fortune, and you basically get immunity, meaning you can be like the Purdue family and drugs. You can do like all the people out there, the insider trade, and do all kinds of things, and be a white-collar criminal, and you can go to like Harvard and all the Ivy League schools, and like Wharton, where Jeremy Siegel tells everybody that they that Powell should cut rates, and he should do something about the money supply. But anyway, what does that mean? Well, they teach you the best on OPM. What is OPM? Other people's money. And the government is the best at doing that. And here's something that I just always found was a myth, too, when I finally woke up. And I was probably in my early 20s, and I met a man I really highly think is a tremendous human being, ex-World War II. And his name was Montanus. Lou Montanus. And what was Lou about? Well, Lou was a sheriff of Marin, but he as a person really understood people. And when he told me, one day I told him, you're a public servant, so you work for me, and you need to do what I tell you to do because you're a public servant. And he started laughing at me. And he said, what do you mean public servant? If you don't work, I don't have a job. And I thought that. I go, wait, he's right. So people that work for the county and the government, that's their job too. It's OPM, other people's money. Guys, firemen in this town, in these areas around here, they retired 56. I know one guy gets $14,000 a month. He retired at 56. And I go, that's not a bad deal. And that's what I thought I was going to be. And that's for another time, for another story. So we got to move on here. And the last we're going to talk about is the feminization of the American male. And that basically is happening we'll say started in the 1950s. We'll go into detail about that, about Kellogg's and how Kellogg started development of a product in 1956. And then you go further and everything and how we feminized the American male. One thing I want to tell you is the best thing we do now to keep China in line, I believe, we have soy protein. And soy protein and soy products are high in estrogen. So for you males out there, and you feel like you're feeling like a girl, you might be having too much estrogen. So anyway, to make a long story short, so people have an understanding, let me just look at something here I want to tell you, is that the United States, one of our biggest export is soy protein. We do 17.9 billion a year. Don't you love that? With the Chinese? So we're feminizing the Chinese males over there too. So that's maybe why they don't have to sell razor blades and stuff there. Anyway, their testosterone rate must be extremely low because they want to keep the population low. But now they want to increase it because they kept it down too long. But do people realize in this America right now, and the way you look at China and what's going on with China, and people could say to themselves, well, are they our enemy? Are they our biggest trading partner? We made China who they are when they tried to separate China and Russia back after the Vietnam War. And that's when we started doing, basically, that's when China grew and became the monster it is today, if you want to call it a monster. But are they a communist nation now? A lot of the people own their own houses. So anyway, we need enemies when you're America. So we're going back to what it was when I grew up, and we're going back to the Cold War. You know, again, we're doing a better job this time because it's scarier now than when I grew up when we had duck and cover all the time. You know, we have it's a lot easier for a nuclear war than it was then. But then our third and final topic we're going to talk about, as I was talking about there, as I just going to finish up on that, is the testosterone rate for the males. It's half of what it was per person, meaning that when I grew up and I was 21, my testosterone rate was double of the people who are 21 today. And what does that have to do? Was it intended? Does it have to do with masculinity? You know, or am I a dinosaur? Because I still consider myself somebody that would consider an alpha male. That's not good. I shouldn't say it on the show. Anyway, what happened is there's a lot of my friends are that way. And when people look at we're going to go over the definition of masculinity, but we're going to try to help these people today what's happening with testosterone. And testosterone is a major motivational for males, too. It gets them moving. When I look at people today, and I look at how I grew up, and I grew up in the fitness era pushed by John F. Kennedy, and what did he give us? He gave us a reward. I'm trying to find it here. But we had the American Fitness Award. And today, they stopped PE after a freshman year. You can even do a sophomore year online, I guess. I love that, online PE. You know, what are they going to come up with next? Anyway, I guess you can probably get someone just to exercise for you. So anyway, AI, you can do whatever you want in the future. And the AI phenomenon, everybody acts like it's a new phenomenon that's driving the marketplaces. AI's been around for years. I mean, I don't know what people think now. They have algorithms that control the stock market and volume and everything. But you're going to find things on this, what I'm going to be talking about, that no one even knows. So anyway, you got the three subjects we're going to talk about on this podcast. I mean, I hope today we have at least 3 or 4 viewers. And anyway, we're going to continue doing this just so you can be educated on what's really happening. And we're going to have our first guest today, and he's going to be speaking for me from the state of Washington. His name's Clay. And Clay was the building inspector in Tiburon here, and I met Clay because I am a contractor. I have a contractor's license, but it makes me interesting in life too. Just so you have another. We won't be going through this every show. Is I learn things from the bottom up. So when you have dyslexic and ADHD, learning can be a difficulty. In my days, it was different, and I'll have someone on the show, and you're gonna love this story. And I'm not gonna say what it is, but it's just like the perfect Manchurian candidate. And when the CIA was looking for the candidate that could use mind control, they were doing LSD in San Francisco. Well, they put us in a class, and I'll get more detail in the future, and all our parents signed off, and they wanted to start giving us Ritalin. And I'm going to tell you more about that story so you get an idea that I wasn't educated at Harvard or the Ivy League schools. I tried college. I played sports. I love sports. Anyway, and the reason I'm telling you this is I had to learn everything from the bottoms up. So I thought I was going to be a fireman. I couldn't get a fireman's job because I thought it would be the perfect job for me since I was a volunteer. I'd been at numerous fires, but then they started affirmative action. And after affirmative action, they started what's called the CETA program. So again, being Irish, You know, I'm 6'2". I weigh about 215 then. I was perfectly fit. I guess that didn't really count. I've been in numerous fires. I've been on top of ladder trucks. I've seen and responded many times on calls as a volunteer. I get paid $5 a call, too. That's pretty good money back then. That was supposed to cover our gasoline, so you can tell gas was cheaper in those days. And one of the guys on our volunteers named David Nivens, he was sitting in the captain's seat, and he was going to a call, and the truck tipped over, and he got killed. Yeah. Oh, that's right. We had an open cab, and we used to ride on the back of fire trucks in those days. Oh, that's right. They don't do any of that anymore. And I would go in with the way cities are. But the great Lou Montanus told me, which I'm going back to again, he also wanted to merge all the police departments into one so we could have more Indians out there fighting instead of chiefs. Well, when you look at city employees today, we work for them. So you remember, when you do something with the city, they're not working there for you. You're working for them. And when we in these towns like Tiburon, everybody thinks you own your own property and this and that. Well, we got to pay rent. It's a different kind of rent. They call it property taxes. And the thing about property taxes is when something breaks and you're paying your rent to the cities, well, you got to pay for it. And then if you rent an apartment, then you just call the manager. So anyway, we're going to start off with Corruption Starts at Home. And I'm going to get Clay on the phone. And I think you're going to find this interesting because this is where I'm going to lead a lot of you people today in that direction about what is really happening in America. And then, again, we're going back. There's no more journalism anymore. Remember how people got caught in Watergate? The journalist, Bernstein? Was that Bernstein? Who was the other one? You know who I'm talking about, everybody. Woodward and Bernstein. And then, wait, you know what? It's amazing, too. When you look at our oligarchs, like Bezos, I think he owns the Washington Times. Wow. Oh, that's right. The Murdoch family owns MarketWatch, News. They own MarketWatch. I know that. They own Dow Jones, the news service. And they own, there's a couple more, and I'll tell you about in the future. Well, isn't it amazing? And they never come out in anything negative on the stock market. It's always something positive. And I have shocking things coming up in our next episode that's going to absolutely shock you what's going on that no one else talks about it. And the first guy to even brush over it was Kennedy, who's running for president. And I don't know why no one else is talking about it, because they know if I can figure it out, they know perfectly well, especially your politicians. And what really makes you unique, too, is when you talk about the Pelosi's, I used to see Paul Pelosi all the time. You know, and I used to go to a place called the Ambassador Health Club in San Francisco. And this is when I worked, too, in investment banking. Now, how did I get there? Well, I first started on the stock exchange as a recorder. Then I worked back office at a place called Holton Collins, and I got licensed there. Then I got recruited by luck by a guy named McCarran, who's passed away. And I owe him so much, too. But he had a lot to gain because he got a bonus on what I made. So his name was Walt McCarran. Walt passed a couple of years ago. Mike Marion passed, too. And anyway, I can tell you things about Wall Street you never heard of because they don't want you to know. So, you know, I hope I'm still here to talk about it in the future. Anyway, that's a bit. We're going to get on our first interview, and I'm going to stop the program now to get Clay. So we're all very lucky here today. Today we have Clay, and it's not necessarily his last name, but Clay was the building inspector for Tiburon, California, and his story is just amazing. And when he was a building inspector, he went through a lot of, how do you say it, politics involved or whatever you want to say. But I met Clay on the job, and Clay was a tough building inspector because Clay basically has ethics and works and has a real deep religious faith. in that faith, Clay can't be, he won't do things unless it's right. So I will let Clay, he can talk to you about what happened in Tiburon, but it's a story that we're going to start on about how corruption starts at home. And this is it. And here's Clay. So, how are you, Clay?
Hey, doing well, Brian. So just a little bit more clarification there. As the building official in the town of Tiburon, so I was in charge of basically everything that came in and went out as far as construction documents go. And I was responsible for the overall acceptance of all construction there. So every inspection and all construction. We had a building inspector that worked there, and he went out and did his inspections, and I would help him each day as well. So we could guarantee next day inspections, which we were able to honor through that process for more than 5 years. So when you would call for an inspection, you could anticipate getting the inspection the very next working day, which just about every building department in the Bay Area could not accommodate that sort of service. So we were excellent with providing that service.
Yeah, could you tell people a little about town of Tiburon and how it works?
Oh, sure. Well, the town of Tiburon, as far as the building department goes, I have a director. A director is a director of development services, and that person, they're responsible specifically for managing people. They don't really have any authority to manage anyone other than they don't have any authority to manage the acceptance of building department inspections. They have the authority just to manage the employees that provide those services. But the technical responsibilities, basically you could consider a building official the chief technical officer for building safety in a town or a municipality. Maybe that's a better way to explain it.
Can you tell us about what happened and what they call the kind of a conflict you had with the town of Tiburon and what happened when they suspended you?
Sure. Well, what happened was I was doing inspections as requested for a local commercial facility. That commercial facility was a restaurant. It was waterfront restaurant, so it had some special criteria as far as minimum exits and things that were required for that. Basically, the rear deck of that restaurant would accommodate more than 50 persons, and at that point, the building code would require 2 exits from the rear deck area. So it was a condition of my approval that the gangways that led down to the docks behind that restaurant would remain open at all times, just to kind of accommodate the loss of the required second emergency exit. So if there was an emergency there, I would need everybody to be able to transition to those docks and lessen the amount of people on that deck in the event of an emergency. Otherwise, people are just going to be pushed into the guardrails or injured or end up in the bay itself. So that was really important that take place. And, well, I was off on a leave of absence for COVID. There was a concern that I had COVID, and I was told that I had to go home. And so I went home. I had a sore throat, I think was my only symptom. And then I was told to stay at home for the week. And I went in to have a COVID test, and it was negative, and I reported that back. They told me, no, we want you to stay at home longer. Okay, well, I didn't know why. But on the following Monday, I was already off for a week. And so here the following Monday, I talked to the building inspector, and he said he felt really bad. He called me, he said, I felt really bad. The Friday of the previous week, he was asked to go and do a final inspection, which he hadn't been trained to do any final inspections. There's a lot to them. And also to accept a whole bunch of accessibility, which he didn't have any certifications to accept the accessibility. In California, you're required to be a certified access specialist, and he wasn't a certified access specialist at that time. I know that he's acquired his Certified Access Specialist certificate just last year. So since the time I had left Tiburon, probably 2 years after that, they went without a Certified Access Specialist. Just kind of a side note there. Now, what happened was I was at home, and he was told to do this inspection, but then as he described it to me, he said that, well, I had to do this inspection with the director present. So you typically wouldn't have a director present. And as I mentioned earlier, the director does not have any authority. It's not in their job description in any way to oversee or accept anything technical about building construction, building safety, or accessibility. Okay, so they weren't qualified to be there. They were there. In addition to the director being there, there was also a member of town council present during this inspection. I've worked at several municipalities. There's never been a town council member, county supervisor, or city council member that attended a final inspection in my whole career. So that was really unusual. The owner of the restaurant was also there, and that's pretty normal. The owner's present. But these other people there, I really felt that the only purpose for them to be there was to intimidate the inspector. And I had trained the inspector on this very subject, that basically at any time, if they feel as though there's a person present during an inspection that's trying to influence the outcome of the inspection, they are required to terminate the inspection. And he knew that, and he practiced that, except for this one event. And he told me that he asked to call me multiple occasions during the inspection, and he was told by the director, "You don't need to call Clay. You don't need to call Clay." So the discrepancies there are there's please go to Marin IJ, to look at the article. I like their article very well. They did such a great job. And just so you can see kind of how all the details went with the inspection, and how the inspector was required to write a note, basically a condition of approval, that this project is approved if you install chains on the gangways, with a sign that says "not for public access," to eliminate the requirement for ADA on the gangway and on the docks. The ADA does not support that at all, and so that's contrary to local, federal, and state laws. But in addition to that, by putting those chains on those gangways, as I mentioned earlier, they're back to one exit. And the facilities needed more than one emergency exit. So it's a very serious life safety concern. So I returned from COVID, and I go to my boss, and I say, "Well, I can't sign this off." And she told me, "You go over there and you sign that thing off." I go over to the place, and I thought it was a training opportunity for me to take the inspector over there. It's always a training opportunity whenever there's something that it needs to be done, and I can show them how to quickly verify something. So I went and bought a couple of 1/2 inch oak dowels, and that represented that's a tool that I would use to check the gaps in the deck, on the rear deck. Basically, you can't have any gaps that are greater than 1/2 of an inch. And I grabbed a couple of pieces of chalk, and I showed him how to do a really quick, rapid inspection to verify that type of work. As I mentioned earlier, he had not been trained. He shouldn't have performed that inspection in the first place. So that's the first thing I do, is I train the inspector on the correct way to do it. So I gave him a wood stick, 1/2 inch dowel, and I showed him, you run the stick down wherever it falls into the groove. That's a non-compliant area. Mark that with chalk. Well, we marked that whole deck with chalk, and this was after supposedly they had repaired it. There was a manager present. They came out and they said, "Hey, we had to remove the repairs." And I said, "You remove the repairs? But you can't do that. This inspector inspected the work and verified repairs, and you pulled them all out." And they said, "Oh yeah, because we had an employee that stubbed their toe or something like that." And then they said, "Well, Well, they tripped and they had to go to the hospital. And oh, okay, well, so you ripped out all these other things. You didn't just repair the location where they tripped. And that's what I was dealing with there when I returned back to work.
Clay, just let me interrupt you. Would you say I just want people here to have a better understanding about the how the situation really. The location here in Tiburon is a well-known location, and I can say who it is. It's Sam's, and Sam's is generational here. And Sam's today, and the owners of Sam's, they're politically connected to. How do I say it? They're politically connected to people in high places, and their agenda, and they were acting for favors basically to push this through when it wasn't in compliance. So if you did what you did and someone died from that or got hurt, then the city would be liable for that. Would you say what I'm saying is correct by that, by just signing it off like they did?
Yeah, well, there's more to it. There's Title II of the ADA and there's Title III of the ADA. So this is Title III work that I'm describing. Firstly, having to do with a public accommodation facility where property owners, the privately owned property and tenants are each individually responsible and liable if someone were to get hurt or injured, or just basically they would feel discriminated against because they can't properly access something because of their physical or visual impairments possibly. All these different disabilities apply to these rules, but also Title II of the ADA. Title II of the ADA is basically the city's directly responsible because they maintain the public restrooms right there that are directly adjacent to the Sam's restaurant. By closing off these gangways, these are typically open, accessible areas for boat operators to come in and moor their boats and come up for a meal and to use those city-maintained restrooms. So those city-maintained restrooms turns it into basically a Title II ADA case where the city's required to make accessibility and anything that they basically maintain or provide, any services they provide, what have you, would have to be open and accessible to disabled persons. So that's how they're directly responsible. The city, I don't know how else they're directly responsible for this other than they play a part in it. After the ARC did the article and they did a really nice investigation, they went back in there and they also checked the gaps. They used a different device. I think it was a 1/2 inch bolt, instead of a 1/2 inch dowel. And they went around and actually double checked everything. That was still, all of the violations were still present at that time. And this was sometime after, maybe, I forget, 6 months, I'd say, after I was terminated from the city of Tiburon, town of Tiburon. But anyway,
how many times? Wait, excuse me. I just want to know how many times were you suspended during this period when this first happened?
Well, when it first happened, I would say I was suspended twice because I was suspended initially for not signing it off, and I had to go home. They removed my title and my authority as building official, basically so they could assign it to some contract person to come over and sign off this project.
Right. So this was let me just make this so people have an understanding. You were doing your job, and you were not doing something that you were just doing your job. So you got suspended because you were doing the job. There is people like the Moana Group that's involved in that. Who's the Moana Group? Well, that's part of the Pelosi's. So there is a lot of political pressure in Tiburon going on when you say that for this to get through, even with the being out of compliance. So politics came into this. And would you tell us too about how when you were suspended for doing what's right, but tell us how many times how they use your electronic signature, because I think that's just unbelievable.
Well, let me wrap up the suspension part. So I was suspended initially and given a date to return. And then they sent me another notification. Oh, we're going to extend it one more week. So there's basically it's an additional suspension that was also unwarranted. And it was for the purpose of this contract inspector who had the certified building official certificate that they felt was sufficient to sign off the project, and that person's name went directly on the permit card. But what I noticed when I returned is that the date that they signed the permit card was the date directly before I was required to return. So it looked like it had to be coordinated with this whoever signed it off. And then they actually suspended me longer, So they gave me an unnecessary, absolutely no justification for extending that additional portion because they told me I could return at one point, and it's no, you have to return one more week later. And you can tell it's only because they didn't have the darn permit card signed off yet by the other inspector who did it all sight unseen. And I say sight unseen because I happened to receive the bill for the outside services. It said for a certified building official, and they named the name of the building official and everything else. It was the same guy. He charged 2 hours one day and 2 hours a second day on this bill or this invoice. And there's just no way their offices were in Pleasanton, California. There's no way they could even drive to and from Tiburon in those 2 hours. So basically, they did everything without even coming to the site to verify.
Yeah, you're saying, I want people to understand, it takes an hour from Tiburon to get to Pleasanton. That's if you're lucky that you're not in traffic.
Yeah, exactly. It's typically 2 hours.
Yes.
It's typically 2 hours because my wife used to commute to Pleasanton, so it would take her 2 hours when there's traffic. So there's just absolutely no way they even came by the site to look at the conditions. It was sight unseen. The person I recognized the name on the permit card, and it was a name that my director had mentioned in the past that she had worked with previously at she was like a planning manager. I don't think she was a director. This is probably her first director job. But previously she was a planning manager, I think, in the city of Dixon. And that same person worked there, and she told me about him in the past. And so she had a personal relationship with this individual, or at least a previous relationship with this individual that did that.
So he was basically paid off to sign off for this. That's what happened. He got paid, never saw the site, and he just signed it off, and it was done to get this through as a favor, a political favor, or they got paid off. I don't know exactly what, but whatever they did was wrong. And
I don't know. When you have a director that shows up at a site and they make the building official stay at home and they force the building inspector to write a document with the town council member present, you can most certainly
come to that conclusion. Yeah.
You can most certainly come to that conclusion or assume that it's just all politics and they just trying to do favors and on top of favors, whatever. I don't know. Right.
Well, I know more of the favoritism, the people that are involved there, and a lot of them. There's a lot of political motivation. One of them, they're big contributors to the to certain candidates too. I won't go into that, but what I'd like you to do is talk about the time when you were suspended, when they used your electronic signature. I thought that was amazing, and I'm gonna set up something and we'll post what the local newspaper did on your investigation too.
Okay. Well, there was another big event that took place right after I returned, and before I realized that they had used my signatures. It was the FBI. The FBI called me up, and there were two agents from the FBI. They wanted to meet with me, and I said, well, can I just meet with you in your offices? And went over to San Francisco, and I met with them in their offices, and I told them everything that happened. And during that meeting with them, I said, well, who made this complaint? I'm really curious because I told all the building officials. I was on the California Building Officials Accessibility Committee because I'm very passionate about disability for in the built environment for disabled people, and so I was on that committee for 2 terms, and when this was all happening, I shared all of this information with them when I returned back to work, and I thought, well, those guys probably have dealt with they're from big cities, really big cities, city of San Jose, all these different big cities all over California, and I thought, well, one of those guys probably told the FBI that what was happening with me or or forwarded one of my emails, to them, and that's why they contacted me. So I asked the FBI. I said, "Well, who put in the complaint, and was it one of these building officials?" And they laughed. They said, "No, usually this takes a long time. It was just a resident in Tiburon." And I was trying to think of, I kind of started the whistleblower process with the building officials, but I also, one of my customers there was a local radio celebrity, and I don't need to mention his name, but I referred this to him and shared emails with him to show him what was happening and everything else, and for his guidance and so on. And I think, well, maybe he was the resident that they were referring to, because he has a lot of, clout, you might say, and maybe that's why it was initiated so quickly. But the FBI interviewed me over this, and I said, well, you need to talk to my director, you need to talk to the building inspector. I did let the building inspector know that they'd be potentially contacting him in advance, so he wouldn't be so surprised when they reached out to him. But that's basically was the extent of it. And then probably the following week after that, I started to realize that, wait a second, all these plans that were approved while I was gone, which was almost 30 days that I was off, they were using my stamp with my signature for the approved stamp, and then the revision stamps, and I think there's another stamp also, has my initials on there. And so, then I did a research and just looked, because it all goes into the record. So I just did a research and ones I could find, and went through each page of those drawings wherever my signature or my initial was used. And I counted 182 times that they used my signature or my initials to approve plans while I was off work.
Wow. So
I was off work with a reminder. I was off work with my title removed and my authority removed. And multiple times after I returned, my director, even before I discovered this about the signatures, she would tell me, "Oh, I had this whole place covered. We had a building official. She told me multiple times. And I received the bill. I'll circle back to that. I received that invoice. It showed a maximum of 4 hours for a building official, because there's only one contract firm that they use while I was off. I won't name that one either. But, they had a bill for 2 separate days for 2 hours, and somehow all this work was covered for 30 days, and it's just, anyway, that was just one of a multitude of lies from this director.
well, would you say that was fraud? What would you say that was fraud, that they used your stamp for approval, your electronic signature for approval 182 times without you even looking at these projects?
It's 182 counts of fraud.
Yes. And can you tell us what's happened?
What's happened regarding that? Well,
Yeah, I mean, does the FBI, tell us what the FBI did and everything too.
FBI closed the case. I didn't know. They didn't tell me they interviewed my director, but my director was boasting about it. Oh, I just talked to the FBI, and I settled things, and the case is closed, and all this other jazz. She had to express that to me, for some reason. But okay, that's the only way I knew that it might have been closed. And then later on, I was asking for access to the public records for that case, and then they told me, it was closed, and they gave me the information on where I could have my attorney go to extract that, so he could possibly get the information on what was said during interviews with other parties and things like that.
You see, Clay, you could have easily given in and done what you did and still have a job, but you decided to do what was right. Would you think that is truthful, what I just said?
That's exactly correct. And
yeah.
I sacrificed my whole job to basically disagree to go along with this, and it's just like I said, I'm very passionate about accessibility in the built environment for disabled persons, and I literally told every building official that's on the California Building Officials Accessibility Committee that I was so proud about this restaurant and how it was going to be one of very few waterfront facilities that would be truly accessible to disabled persons once it was completed. So I was very proud about it. I actually had an email that I'd sent out to everyone. I said, please come by and visit the town of Tiburon, and you'll see how accessible the town of Tiburon is to disabled persons. And I mentioned that restaurant, and I said, in the waterfront area and everything that was going to take place there, they installed a accessible gangway. So an accessible gangway has to be of a minimum length in order to qualify as an accessible gangway. And they even put special guards on it too, because the Tiburon had ordinances for special guardrail systems required over water. Well, they spent basically in the range of $125,000. Maybe to $150,000 to have this custom gangway constructed, and it's a huge contrast, because to wrap up the project, all they had to do was level the dock and either replace the boards on the dock or and then on the deck as well, and really that dock by itself might have been only $5,000 worth of repairs. Now remember, they did the repairs for the building inspector, so I was circling and zeroing in on that dock as being the last item. And so that last item, the dock and leveling the dock, it's like a piece of flotation, like styrofoam, just to level it just a little bit, and then basically either redo the boards or cover the boards with pressure-treated plywood. So the cost of pressure-treated plywood would hardly have been any expense at all. So they did all of these things to cause me to get fired and so on. And really, they only had about $5,000 worth of repairs needed to complete the project. And they wanted to turn it into a big political thing that literally cost the town, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars in attorney fees. But it was only $5,000 of repairs that were needed.
So would you say a good position is to be an outside attorney for the city because they're always busy? That's just my humor, you know.
The town of Tiburon. Well, no, it's a good lead-in to something that I think that everyone should know. Is the town of Tiburon traditionally had their own full-time hired attorney firms that worked for the town directly. They had their own office. They were a full-time attorney. They were the town attorney. That was since Tiburon was created in the 1960s. Okay, I know two of them that were the attorneys there. I worked with one that over in the town of Danville. One I was the plans examiner in the town of Danville, and then I worked with a different one that when I started at the town of Tiburon. Well, when she retired, the town attorney retired. The current town manager promoted the use of a contract attorney firm, and if you were to compare the amount of money that's spent to pay this contract attorney firm and compare that to the cost of what the full-time attorney used to, who took care of everything. No, there were problems there, and she did it all. She was just so good at her job. Now they have this contract attorney firm. The contract attorney, he has his title as the Tiburon town attorney, and all these other attorneys that work for him that you typically also get jumping in on things. They're called the assistant town attorney, and they're not. They're a contract attorney firm, and boy, every time you send them an email, it's like, well, I need clarification on this. I need clarification. Just about every email where the directors, they don't want to have to have any legal responsibility over anything, or maybe other political things are taking place, like we were talking about before. Well, then they get this client attorney protection, that so it doesn't become a public document any longer. So they just send so much stuff over there because they think they're so well protected, but I don't feel as though they are. And with all the stuff that I experienced there, and this one project personally, I absolutely could not sign it off. I mean, even in my explanation to my director of what needs to be done there, she said, "You do an inspection. You tell me what needs to be done there," and so I did. And one of the items on there was the ADA sign, which is called the International Symbol of Accessibility, which is basically the stick figure of the symbol of a stick figure in a wheelchair on blue background, white on blue background, typically. Well, that was on the piling pole down the end of the dock, and that basically tells everybody that's coming up by boat that, hey, these facilities are accessible. Don't worry, you won't be abandoned on this dock where you can't move anywhere. Don't worry. You won't injure yourself and fall in the water on this dock. Don't worry. That's what that sign means. It means, don't worry, disabled people, you can use this dock. And so I told her, I said, you have to remove that sign. And she said, oh, that's a pre-existing condition. They just throw words out there that actually don't comply to the concern.
Yeah, see, what I'm trying to do for these viewers today, I want them to understand that you were doing your job. You were doing it because that's what you're hired to do. You had people above you that there was politics involved that were enforcing things happening, and there was fraud committed. That they used your electronic signature 182 times, and those were on plans. So if something happens with those 182 plans, something that you signed off on, which you never did, and something comes back to the city will be liable. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
It would be fair to say that I would be liable.
Well, how could you be liable if you didn't do the electronic signature and they did it?
Well, see, that's why I complained about everything.
Yeah.
Because they're putting me in harm's way. That's why I initiated everything that I initiated on such a large scale, including reporting my concerns to you when you were running for town council.
Yes, people don't understand that I ran for town council, and I had told the local paper, IJ, that this town was corrupt. I'd said it during my debate we had a debate that was televised, and they said they were going to send a reporter, which they never did. And the local person who handles local paper in this area lives 2 hours away in a whole different county. So what there basically is in Tiburon, and I think what's going on is the people involved were very wealthy people in Sam's. They had political ties too. The Moana Group is the manager of Sam's, and that's a Pelosi tie. And all these people work together. Would you say that's a fair assessment, or you're not really you don't understand it the way I do? With the Pelosi's, the political aspect.
Well, I'll just circle back to what I said before, Brian, which is it's more than obvious to me that it was a political gameplay, because to assign the building inspector to sign off the project while I was being forced to stay off work, and then having the director and a town council member present is just really shady, low level sort of approach to getting a project signed off.
Right.
So it's basically that's how I want to put it in order to answer your question. That I agree with you.
Yeah, I got here in front of you and I mentioned this to you. I have Greg Chanis, who's the town manager. I have in 2017. It looks like he bought the condominium when he came up here. He bought it from a town council member. Was some sort of tie to the city. He paid $825,000 for it, and
yeah, he was so happy about that purchase. And all I know is what he told me. And when he bought that thing, he said, I got it off the market. I'm buying it from someone off the market. The mayor is selling it. I just already was thinking too much information. I didn't want to hear it. He's obviously already including some sort of benefit that he's receiving from another town official who was the mayor, at that time, and it was just too much information. That's the extent of it that he was boasting about. He's so happy he got this thing off the market, and yeah, you can look at the value of what it was sold for, and I was in the market. I was trying to get local housing there, but I was told I couldn't have housing there because my salary is too high.
Right.
So I couldn't live in the local housing. Well, so the housing for the town is right in the same complex, and so that was another concern I had. It's like, well, what is it? This thing, was it something that someone earmarked this condominium for the special low-income housing program for employees first? And you'll notice in one of the articles, I think it was from the ARC, where the town manager chimed in and said, "Oh well, that's employee housing only. It's not for low-income housing." Well, go back and look at the records. I happen to know that when I started there was somebody that worked for the library that was honored, and they were available to work in there because they qualified as low-income housing. And then there was somebody from the school district that was also allowed to live there under the provisions for low-income housing that the town had set up. So that was the whole program, was that you had to qualify, and I don't know if I submitted it to you, but I submitted it to my attorney. They actually have a form that you have to fill out to qualify for low-income housing to be able to live there. However, the director of finance lives there. She's in charge of the whole program. So and that's
Right.
where this
Wait.
all came up.
Yeah. Let me just interject this. That you were going to say probably that she was made too much money to qualify to live there, but she lived there. Is that what you were going to say, or?
Well, she made a lot more money than I made, and I wasn't qualified to live there. She's not only does she receive that benefit, but she also only has to work 35 hours per week, where every other director has to work 40 hours per week. It's a real strange thing. Why is one director only required to work 35 hours a week? And so with that, plus the discount that she's getting on this housing that was earmarked for low income only, and then it's because the rates are much lower. When I was there, they're around the $1,500 or $1,600 range. Could you imagine having a downtown condo that overlooks that beautiful pond,
Yeah.
and everything, and for only $1,600 per month, So add that to the salary, puts her probably higher than the chief of police salary, actually.
Right. So what you're basically saying, she should have never lived there. She was running the program, but she was living there, and she didn't qualify because she weighed too much money. That's like to clarify this. Would you say that's accurate?
100%.
Yeah. So let's talk about Greg Chanis again. Greg bought that for $850,000. Now Greg he runs the town. He's the city manager, and he reports basically to town council members. Now I have that sale here in front of me right now, and what I can't figure out is how he got I have a document here, and it's from real estate firms. They check they check your status. It's MLL listings for all the houses when you want to get information on it, what they're sold, the mortgages on it, and everything. So I just wanted to check myself to see how much the mortgage was. And he paid $825,000. The previous mortgage was by Wells Fargo. And then his mortgage is $4,380,000, and that's by LoanDepot.com. Now, LoanDepot.com is a big mortgage company, and it was as high as $30, and I looked last, it was like $2. So a person like myself, I looked to see if it was cross-collateralized, and I can't find that. So I'll see, maybe I can call Greg and ask him how he pulled that one off. But you know what I found out too? Greg doesn't live there. He lives across the street on the other one, on the lagoon side. He rents that.
Yeah, well, that's true.
What a great town manager. He's taking care of himself, which is, I just want to make sure these people are happy because, as I said before, I am a guy that I talked to the ex-chief of police who I used to know, the sheriff of Marin, and I told him, I said, he would always say that he I said to him, well, you work for me because, I pay the taxes and this and that. And I said, they say, what did I say that before? What was the term? What was the term I used? I'm asking.
I don't know, but
I'm asking my associate here, and he's not answering. What do they call it? What do they call people who work for the public again? They call them they use
Servants.
public servants. And I'm going back to this, and he says they people like politicians especially. They say that they're public servants, and every time I hear that now, I get heartburn. Because I go, oh my God, you got to be sick. It makes me sick to my stomach. Anyway, to just follow up on that, as I've said before, that's what he was right. Lou Montanus, when he was sheriff, he wanted to consolidate all the towns. We shouldn't have districts anymore. We should maybe have 3 fire departments for the county instead of we have 1 fire department for each little area around here, and they call them districts so they can get away with things. But we'll talk about that on the show next time. That will be really interesting. People are going to love hearing this one. And anyway, to finalize this, because I know you're going to be out of time shortly, but I'm trying to people to grasp how corruption starts at home. And our local newspaper here now doesn't even have a local reporter. Marin County doesn't have a local reporter. So I'm trying to imply to our audience today, these people in cities now basically do whatever they want, and a lot of them are unionized too. So would you think that's a true assessment or not?
Well, they're unionized up to a certain level, so...
Yeah, well, I'll get in the fire departments next
typically
time.
your rank and file...
Yeah.
Yeah, you go above that, you get your rank and file that typical, but not Tiburon. And so they thought that they would represent themselves in some manner. They said, no, we're better, we provide better benefits. And they actually used to be unionized, and they stopped doing that. And then you can see how they abused their own personnel laws and personnel rules when they got rid of me.
Right, and that a lot of people had empathy for you because a lot of people know what happened to you. And even today, it just shows you how these people are still getting away with this. But the only way, you can't qualify like Greg Chanis for a loan of $4 million. What was it here? Let me get the exact amount from the MSL.
Oh,
$4,380,000. What?
Well, I just want to interject something. They're still doing things. I just received a call recently. I didn't share that with you when I talked to you last. I just received a call recently from a resident of Tiburon, and they were looking at my case, and they really looked into it. And they read all of the articles, and they sought me out, and they located me, and they wanted to talk to me about it because they're currently being abused by the directors there, and the same director that was my boss. And the guy just wanted to put up a fence, and he owns the land. He submitted a survey showing that he owns the land, but he's having a conflict with the uphill neighbor. And basically, what happens is, in the past with Sam's and other projects that I've observed, is my director would take a side of one person or the other, which you're not supposed to do, and she would entirely just represent that other party, and so she would never be neutral. She would basically not provide services that are just a general right for every resident there. And putting up a 6-foot fence, he just wanted to put up a 6-foot fence, which is allowed by planning and everything else. It wasn't excessive. It was directly on his property. He paid for a surveyor to prove that it was on his property. And so, no, the abuse goes on. The abuse continues.
Do you think I was abused when I've gone through the building department?
Oh, absolutely. And I know who you were abused by.
Yeah.
And yes, I do. I know that you were required to reconstruct your whole front yard area. This law basically it wasn't even a law. It was a resolution. It had just gone into effect. So basically, there's a couple things about what happened to you, Brian. But I'll go over this one first. Basically, your front yard improvement. You were told you had to cut it back and redesign it and make it to where it could be removed in case the city wanted to widen the street there in front of your house.
Yes.
Well, but this was just a recent resolution. It wouldn't apply. Building code applications are the date of authority for a project. So the date that you put in that application for a permit, that's the date of authority. This resolution came in after that date of authority. It was absolutely just abuse to make you do all of that. I know it cost you probably another $300,000, and I have examples of several projects like that.
Yeah, can I just add in too that what they did too is I had to hire an attorney. And you have to get an attorney most of the times in the city of Tiburon and the architects too. And the architects, they usually, how do you say it? If you want to get an architect, which I did on another job here, you got to use a local architect in this town. So it's a good old boy system here in this town, and the attorney I had, it cost me a lot of money in attorneys. And the town, now I find out they have no even real rights. It's the original, this area. You know what? I'll have to bring that up in the next program. But there's a family that owns all the property and this rights here, and the city didn't have the rights. We found out recently. So, just the guy running the city right now for the Public Works, I don't know where they got him, but he actually works well. I don't know this guy, and he's a really good guy, and he works with us. And the Lyford family is the one who owns all the property rights on this street. You know that?
Oh, I know what you're referring to now.
Yeah.
So, it's the lands of Lyford.
Yeah.
And so they don't even know by what percentage and how many people are involved in the Lyford family. But yeah, that's right. They own all the rights to the streets, and so then what you have is you have the ability to put things that nobody knows the true road width and things in that area. But yeah, you're right. The town doesn't have any authority in those areas.
Right. So anyway, you know what? I appreciate your time, Clay. And you know what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going in. I'm going to be talking about what's happened, the unfairness to the police department here. And again, I really want people to understand that this is just a small town. When you step it up, there's more corruption the higher you go. So, when we talk about something like the governorship with Gavin, see, I can't help it. Every time I say his name, I get so nervous because I know if I look at the paper today, something's going to happen that I'm going to go, oh, I'm not a beneficiary of that. Anyway, can you just verify that the city of Tiburon, because they abused us and tortured us, were they a signatory of the, what is that, the signatory of, after wars? Geez, here I am having a senior moment. I'm going to have to cut this part out,
No, I don't know what that one is.
Well, again, a signatory after the war, the Geneva Convention. That's what I was looking to say. So Tiburon's not a signatory of the Geneva Convention, right? So they're allowed to torture you as a citizen here, correct?
Holy cow! I'm not aware of any of this stuff.
Well, as you said, I was abused, so it's like torture. The same thing. You were
abused on that level. And
yeah.
I thought I would also share that when you were running for town council, and this is a huge federal offense. You had requested public records. You requested public records for all projects greater than $500,000, all projects. And then you only received records for residential. They never gave you the commercial records. You requested that, and that would have made a difference, I feel, for your campaigning, because that was at the same time the MENA project was submitting their final cost evaluation.
Wow.
They brought in over $200,000 for this final cost evaluation. And okay, that's all in the resolutions and the ordinance or approved by town council and so on and so forth. But what they also include are plan review fees. Now, plan review fees are services that are never provided after a project is completed. In fact, all the plan review fees are completely paid for up to the point. Anytime they do a revision, they pay from their wallet. They pay directly any cost that we may have had with plan review. And then at the end of the project, you have reimbursement for reevaluation of project value, and then they include plan review fees. The other thing about it is that they use this plan check company. Again, I'm not going to mention their name, but the same one that sent that inspector over that signed off that darn project. They have a contract. The contract is a percentage, is what they get paid, a percentage of the plan review fee. Well, if you're collecting more plan review fees at the end of every single project, you're actually obligated to pay that same percentage to that contract plan review company because it's in their contract. And it's just piling up and piling up and piling up. And any time that they can just sue the city and get a huge amount of money, that city is so terribly managed that there's just building up liability all over the place. And all the money, it's okay because they got this unlimited budget for paying that contract attorney, and that's just how they deal with things. And it's so very irresponsible.
Right.
And if I were a resident there in Tiburon, I would be so upset about how they manage that municipality there.
Well, that's maybe why they have so many bars, so we can go and maybe drink there. Wait, it's really expensive too. Try to forget it, So just, I want you to know, and before you go, is that one of the people that are the owners of that property that you've talked about, he was involved in a dog incident at the dog park here in Tiburon. And he had a dog, and it bit this gentleman who was 76-year-old in the ankle. And then when the person went down to swat it away, it bit him in his butt. And I saw the one on his ankle. I didn't want to see the one on his butt. But he had to go to the hospital. He had some problems from it. He got picked up by the person who was the owner of that owner of that restaurant, and he threw him. And this guy's bigger than taller than I am, and he threw him by his neck, and he ended up by me. There was 30 people there, and they started screaming, right? And he was going to finish him off, and I got in between, and I told him, hey, knock the F off, So anyway, to make a long story short, is that there is 30 people there approximately, a lot of guys younger than myself. And you know what everybody said? I don't want to get involved. So that's how America's become. That's our signature word. I don't want to get involved. So anyway, he was charged. And again, under the laws today, that would have been a felony. He got it reduced, and it was down to a misdemeanor, and now he has to just do his anger management. And he used Camellia Harris's firm, as that's the firm that got him off, the vice presidents. We'll talk about Camilla one of these days too. She's again, I was trying to figure out what she's ever done in life. If I was a comedian, I'd love her out there because she always laughs all the time. I don't know if she's smoking weed or not, but anyway.
Yeah, she is. She must be. She has that one statement that says, "I just want a future that has that doesn't represent the past." And she looks like a stoner that's sitting around a campfire.
Yeah, that's what I think,
Smoking a joint, It's like, I want a future that doesn't represent the past. Doesn't resemble, doesn't have the burdens of the past. That's the future that I want. And she says it over and over and over. And she's like so proud of herself when she says that line. It's so funny, really.
Well, that's why I'm doing the show. I'm worried. And, again, you're in Washington now, and I'm here. I'm on the front lines, right? Trying to fight the battle and make these people aware. And again, this is like a very raw program here. And what I think is people better stop saying, I don't want to get involved, And they better start getting involved because they don't have any idea what's coming. And I can tell you it's not going to be pretty. And we'll be talking about that on later shows. But again, how long has our show been on, Dominic?
About an hour.
I still have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I wanted to say one more thing, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Wrapping things up. Well, I just want to ask everybody that's listening that if they could just please pray for my attorney, David Anderson. He's the person representing me for this case. Now, he did sue the town and was successful with the MENA project, so he was actually the best choice for me to sue the town and be successful a second time. But gosh, about 7 weeks ago, he became ill. He went to the hospital. I don't know any of the details. He's been in the hospital since, and his assistant told me that he may be going into a nursing home soon. Another attorney went in on his behalf and on my behalf, spoke to the courts. I have a permanent stay in the courts. David has a permanent stay in the courts until he gets better. And so I just want to ask everybody, please pray for David. And we're all God's children. We have a voice. God's our Father, and He loves to hear from us. Doesn't matter what our religion or our belief is. It's all the same God. And so please ask Him to take care of David Anderson, attorney in Marin County.
All right, that thing I think is apropos too. You know that he's doing something trying to help the good of this world, even if he is an attorney. That's like a joke too, But anyway, yeah, Clay. It's again, there's a lot more to talk about Tiburon. I'm just going through the surface. I don't think people really grasp how politically there is no oversight in government anymore, and that we work for them. You know that is. If I don't pay my property taxes, I just rent here, then they take my place, and you were doing your job, and you're the first guy who's done his job, did everything to the book, and then they fire you. That's what I don't understand. But see, the people in this town don't understand. The people running this are making us liable for more lawsuits in the future. We're going to be talking about one in the fire department over sexual harassment, one that was $500,000. That's going to be on next one. That's another situation. But anyway.
I tried to figure out the cost of. Basically, you've got three primary bullies that work for the town of Tiburon. That's what they love to do, is bully.
Yes.
And they'll bully internally, or they're bullying the residents or whoever walks in the door. But I figured out, with benefits and everything, and the cost that they are implying towards the random use of the attorney services, just because they don't want to fill out a form themselves. They're supposed to be in charge of their department. Now, they have the attorneys, create the form. They're supposed to be duly experienced and educated for the positions that they're in, but they're not. They just have to turn everything over to the attorney to write up every little notice for them, and so on and so forth. They are totally, and their salaries, their benefits, and these costs to the attorney, I'm sure it's over $500,000 of loss for these three bullies that are there. And the town manager's in charge of them. He's responsible too for all their behavior, and he's obviously part of the problem for allowing it, promoting their permanent stay there. And that's the other thing about permanent stay, Brian, is that these are all unelected officials. These are unelected officials, and this is what you'll find at all levels of government. We've seen that with the current administration in the White House. These are all unelected officials that are running the show. The elected officials, they're spoon-fed information. The town council, they're spoon-fed information from these people, and they go along with the staff report because they want to support, what the staff are doing. Well, it's not a good method for running that town or any city or what have you. They really need to look at the information and challenge the information that's being presented to them. Make sure that the town staff are really doing a good job. They're following the laws. Challenge them on it. That's what needs to be done by town council.
Well, yeah.
Challenge the staff.
But town council is supposed to be representing us, and I just want you to understand is when they handled the situation here with Yema and with the police department, and everybody's seeing what happened in the police department, but when you have the mayor and the vice mayor who represents the city going out and supporting the Black Lives Matter when they're supposed to be representing the city, that's something wrong. And this town still hasn't recovered from what they've done. And that's going to be for another time, because we're running too long. Our show right now is over an hour and a half. So, again, we're going to tell people to drink coffee during the show so they can stay up. That's just a joke, too. But
All right. Well,
but yeah, and I'll get you a copy of the show, and I'm going to see if I'm going to ask Dominic here. Dominic, will we be able to get the articles and post them so people can see? Because I think people in this town in a lot of ways don't care, but they better start caring because crime and everything's out of control, and the great Gavin is legalized crime. So, again, it's like, it's like one of the things we're going to talk about too on the show is masculinity, and masculinity is not a bad word, and we're going to go over the definition of that, but that's to protect, and that's what I feel like I'm doing this show, and that's what you were doing when you were acting as town council. Most people, they in Tiburon or what they say today is, I don't want to get involved, and that's why this country is like the end of the Roman Empire, and it's coming to an end. So anyway, I got to sign off on this show, and Dominic, and Dominic's going to make one little comment, and we're going to be done. All right? It was good talking to you, Clay, and I'll talk to you and get you a copy of this.
Sounds great.
Okay, bye.
Thank you very much.
All right.
I appreciate the conversation.
Bye.
Take care.
So, Dominic, I would like you to tell our audience before we do this, because you are a person of few words, which is good, but tell us about what you told me earlier about when you tell people and you tell them factual information and how they accept that information, because I'd really like you to tell our audience that.
Yeah, you could tell them, some people, you could show them everything right in front of them, and they'll come up with excuses for these people they've never even met, and they'll tell you what you're saying isn't true, and I don't know if it's out of fear or what, but yeah, people aren't comfortable with what's real.
Right. And that's what we're trying to do on this show. I mean, this show, you might think, wow, it's not pretty enough or whatever. And behind you, you're going to learn about all these people that I've been involved in, their families, and they're all Gold Star families. And my involvement with the people that are basically, when you look behind us, these are young men that went and fought and they died for your country. And a lot of people don't really understand that the oligarchs in our country never have any blood in the game, or anything into the game, and that's really important. And we're gonna teach kids a little too about history, the John F. Kennedy assassination. One of my guests will be a person that's spoken numerous times on the JFK assassination. I also have a friend of mine, and he's from SEAL Team 6. He's gonna come on the show and talk about things. And again, we're gonna try to get you people that only are gonna tell you something that the culture wants you to think that they don't. I'm not here to conquer and divide. That's what the Republicans and Democrats do with each other. What I'm here is trying to get you to understand, if we don't do something, we're going to all go down the toilet together. And what's going to happen right now, and it's happening, and it's really getting to the point, they want you to not like each party. That's their whole goal, because we're going to have a reset this year. And you're going to go to digital, and the government's going to say they have to do this to this and that and tell you, or China did a cyber attack. We got some information coming up, and you'll have a greater understanding. So we're going to sign off now, and I hope you enjoyed the show. And everyone else, I lived in a podcast, they go, give us a like or a non-like. Do we have likes and non-likes? We're only going to accept likes. So we may maybe get 3 or 4 likes. We're good. So I got to call my daughters and tell them to hit the like button. So anyway, I hope you got something out of this. And remember, when you see Powell, the only thing he knows about a tool is he knows how to screw you.